cause unknown. Cause unknown is rampaging around the planet far quicker than the monkeypox, and it's hit the British Isles. We'll get into it with our stat man, Jamie Jenkins. And the big shut-up continues. Most of the stuff we talk about here, from vaccine victims to Pakistani rape gangs, you're not meant to talk about at all. Kathy Gingell is permanently banned from Twitter, but she's always welcome on the Mark Steyn Show, and she's here tonight. Plus, the most vital part of the show, all the more important when we live in the constant swirl of a blizzard of lies. Your comments and questions, give it your best. Be as personally vicious about me as you wish. I can take it. But do send them along by email to gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can Twitter me at GBNews. But first, as ever, the latest headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. A final attempt by the parents of Archie Battersby to postpone the withdrawal of his life support has been refused by the European Court of Human Rights. The 12-year-old has been in a coma since April, and doctors have declared him brainstem dead. His parents appealed to the European Court just hours before Bart's Health NHS Trust had been expected to end his treatment. Previously, 3 judges in the UK refused to stop the withdrawal of Archie's care, citing it was in his best interests. Sajid Javid has become the latest heavyweight to throw his support behind Liz Truss to be the next Conservative Party leader. Writing in The Times, he criticised her rival Rishi Sunak and his policies, insisting tax cuts are now essential. Meanwhile, a YouGov poll shows 60% of party members support the Foreign Secretary and just 26% back Mr Sunak. Well, both candidates have made their opening speeches at tonight's hustings event in Cardiff. Rishi Sunak, you can see there, is currently answering questions from audience members. And we'll bring you more on this throughout the evening. The Bank of England is expected to announce another interest rate hike tomorrow. The central bank's under pressure to control spiralling inflation, with a think tank warning it could hit 15% next year. The Resolution Foundation says oil prices have fallen substantially, but gas price increases are wiping out any good news. If the bank raises the base rate by half a percentage point, it'll be the biggest increase since 1995. G7 foreign ministers are calling on China to de-escalate its aggressive military activity around the Taiwan Strait, following the highest-level US visit to the island in 25 years. In a 24-hour trip, US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with Taiwan's president, signalling Washington's support for the nation. In response, the Chinese Air Force sent around 30 jets across the median line bordering the two countries. Beijing says it plans further military exercises around the island's sea and air borders. The first shipment carrying food out of Ukraine since the start of Russia's invasion is on its way to Lebanon after inspections in Turkey. The ship is carrying around 26,000 tonnes of corn. In an exclusive interview with GB News, the chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, says the delay in exports from Ukraine is forcing UK food prices higher.
The cost of living crisis that we're experiencing here is directly consequential to the fact that grain cannot get out of Odessa. That is ground zero when it comes to the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, being able to feed not just its own country, but Africa and indeed Europe as well. Get that grain moving, and then grain prices, food prices then drop. That affects the cost of living. You sort out Ukraine, oil and gas prices will lower as well.
TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
The towns of England, from the gritty north to the leafy south, Rotherham and Rochdale, Banbury and Aylesbury, towns of dark secrets, very dark. Towns where for decades child rape gangs of Pakistani men have operated with impunity, indeed with the connivance of counsellors, policemen and social workers. The scale of depravity, the thousands of lives ruined, is underreported and as far as the specifics are concerned, basically unreported. Yesterday, we mentioned that despite the best efforts of Oldham Council to sweep it under a rug already bulging with all the other dark secrets buried there, now unconfirmed reports that there will be an official inquiry into what we euphemize as grooming gangs and acronymize as CSE, child sexual exploitation. These are polite, evasive terms for the most brutal gang rape, and these inquiries, while they provide jobs for baronesses, have not succeeded in changing the culture in those towns, either among the rape gangs or among the officialdom that accommodates the rape gangs. We have reported for some weeks now on the case of Samantha in Oldham. She was 12 years old when she went to Oldham police station to say that she had been sexually assaulted by, this is a quote from last month's official report, quote, an Asian male known only as Ali in the graveyard of Oldham Parish Church. So after the rape, she goes where you think you might go to get some support, the police station. But the desk officer wasn't interested. He told her to go away and suggested she was drunk. So she was standing in the lobby of the police station wondering what to do next when two men came up and inveigled her into their car. Are you an Oldham resident with paedophile taste? There seems to be quite a lot of it in Oldham. The cop shop's the easiest place to pick up girls, the one-stop cop shop for all your needs. Samantha, 12 years old, was taken from the police station, led away, and was raped again in the car, then kicked out at Werneth Park, and then she asked a man for directions, Mr. Sarwar Ali, who took her back to his pad and raped her again, third time that day for 12-year-old Samantha. But when he was done with her, he very kindly gave her the bus fare. She never made the bus because this man here, that's Shakil Chowdhury, posing as a cab driver, got her into his car and drove her to a house where four other blokes were waiting, and they raped her all through the night. Raped for a fourth time and raped again and again and again and again. All because the desk officer at Oldham Police Station couldn't be bothered with a 12-year-old rape victim. Is he still working as a policeman? Well, we know that he certainly wasn't fired over it. As we've also reported in recent weeks, Oldham Council then shut down proposals for an official inquiry into the gang rape culture that officialdom has nurtured and protected in that benighted town. When they did so, the crowd at the council meeting got a little indignant. And the council and Greater Manchester Police's response was to identify the residents at that meeting and issue them with ASBO. So, just so we understand clearly how depraved this sick municipality is, they do nothing about the Pakistani rape gangs, and then if you're impertinent enough to grumble about their connivance with paedophiles, they give you an ASBO. Among those on the receiving end of their vindictiveness is Samantha's mother, Debbie Cole, who joins me now. Debbie, you went to that meeting. You wound up getting an ASBO. What did they say you'd done to deserve that ASBO?
Hiya, Mark. Lovely to see you. They said that I'd encouraged a man to climb over the barrier. They said I'd thrown a missile. They said I had swore abusive language to the council leader. I didn't do any of those things at all. They said I disrupted the meeting. They've done a list of all sorts, really, which is all untrue.
And so they basically complained that you were swearing at the council leader.
Yeah, I won't repeat what they've said, I've said, because, you know, it's before the 9 o'clock was. But I didn't say it because I don't say it. But there's my antisocial behaviour. Verbal abuse, there you are, verbal abuse, language inciting, threatening a journalist. Apparently I threatened a journalist. No, there's all sorts. There's all sorts that they threaten. Throwing a missile. I didn't throw a missile, Mark.
It's very weird that this council, which did nothing about the rape gangs in Oldham year in, year out, but suddenly it gets very upset if at a council meeting citizens come and complain about the inaction of Oldham Council, and you guys, they're far more eager to punish you than they are to punish the gang rapists.
Yeah, they are. They've done a number of things to residents in the Oldham community. They've sent antisocial behaviour threatening letters to everybody. They've actually breached my data as well regarding sending my ASBO. But what they've done, you see, the thing is, Mark, I've been trying to support Sam. Sam is I've adopted Sam. I'm not a biological mother. I am a mother she's adopted me and I've adopted her. As far as I'm concerned, she's my daughter and I'm a mother. So she gets a bollocking when she needs one. But Sam is a beautiful girl. And the way that they've treated her has been absolutely appalling. When I first went up to the council chambers to fight for the children of the town, the council leader at the time, Sean Fielding, wanted to call it all barefaced lies. It was all barefaced lies. But yet the council leader just gone out, Arush Shah, she said in March that, yes, grooming has been going on in Oldham and it's still happening in Oldham. So you've got two council leaders, both Labour, one saying it's all barefaced lies and calling all the residents barefaced liars, and the other one saying, oh, I'm sorry, yes, it is happening. Now this council leader is sending ASBOs to anybody that wants to disagree with anything that they say.
Samantha was eager to speak to the people who were conducting the inquiry that the report came out last month. She was keen to speak to them. The council actively obstructed her participation in that inquiry. Why would they do that?
Well, they didn't want the truth getting out there because they have massively failed at Samantha. Sam desperately wanted to speak to Malcolm Newsom and Gary Ridgway. And I, as a mum, because I contacted Maggie Oliver and the foundation, Maggie Oliver Foundation, and that was the only way that we could actually get Sam in to do her interview. But then when she did do her interview, we do have a recording of Gary Ridgway then stating that the council didn't want Sam to be interviewed. They pushed against it really hard. They said that she would have committed suicide if she had been interviewed. She wouldn't have committed suicide. She's a really strong girl now. She's absolutely fantastic. But they did their utmost. And Gerard Jones, the executive for Children's Services at Oldham Council, when Brian Orbin actually asked him in a full council meeting not so long ago, he barefaced lied in front of everybody and said, nobody stopped Sam. But we've got Gary Ridgway. We have a recording of Gary Ridgway stating that very thing. Plus, it's in the review.
Why do you think that Oldham Council seems far keener on protecting these gang rapists than actually doing anything for the girls of Oldham?
I think that boils down to the Labour vote. I think it is a political thing because in Oldham, a lot of Labour supporters are from the Muslim community. So to keep them voting for them, I think that's why they protected them. I think that's why it has been a political thing. Jim McMahon, who's the MP for Oldham Royton West, has been seen at the mosque, thanking them all for the votes.
Yeah, there's a lot of connections between the councillors and people who were involved in these rape gangs, and the guy who ran the rape gangs was actually employed by the council. As we know, these useless policemen seem very friendly to them. you said your daughter was strong. After what she went through that night when she was 12 years old, you're either strong or you're utterly destroyed by it. And fortunately, Samantha seems to have had the strength to overcome it. But the fact is that only 2 of the men who raped her that night have actually paid any price for it. So there's still something like 6 or 7 of them out there. As I understand it from Oldham, these are networks and the identities of these men are not unknown. Don't you think it's disgraceful that Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police can only find basically a fifth of the men who raped your daughter?
It's absolutely appalling, Mark. It's absolutely appalling what they've done. The police knew. The police identified one of them that went into the police station that actually walked out of the police station with Sam. They also identified the other 2 that was in the car. They also arrested one and then let him out on bail, and he's done a runner. That's 4 or 5 that I know of, and there are more, and the police do know. One of the perpetrators, his wife, went to the police station and actually said, "My husband has confessed to raping this child. This guy actually tried to murder his wife." They've not dealt with that at all. Greater Manchester Police, they just don't want to. They've just not dealt with it at all.
Do you think Greater Manchester Police and the council? We used to have the presumption that people were so revolted by paedophilia. You don't want to be a paedophile in an English prison, supposedly, because all the other prisoners will do terrible things to you because everyone is revolted by paedophilia. In Oldham, nobody who matters seems to be revolted by paedophilia. The councillors are friends with the paedophiles. The policemen are friends with the paedophiles. The social workers are friends with the paedophiles. What's up with that?
The council workers were paedophiles. You had Shamir Ahmed that worked for Oldham Council. He was a member of the Labour Party and he was a paedophile. You also have the Lib Dems Rob Blythe, he was a convicted paedophile for the Lib Dems. That wasn't reported to the residents of Oldham either. Oldham Council have kept so much hidden, and the only thing that I could think of that this is a political thing that they're doing it, and they are protecting the politicians, and it has to go all the way to the top. When Sam asked for her information by a gentleman from the Home Selects Committee, Keith Baz, he wrote to Jim McMahon. He was the council leader at the time. He said there's nothing to see here. It's a passage in time, so we can't look into it. This is a child. This is a 12-year-old little girl who was just hanging about with her mates in a church grounds, and she was molested. Right. And then she went to the police station and did the right thing, and all that happened.
Now, I would like to know who that desk officer was, because none of these policemen have paid a price for it. The failures of Greater Manchester Police, all these people are either still employed by the constabulary or they're enjoying their lavish pensions, completely disconnected from the hell that they have caused your daughter and all these other girls. It's quite shameful. You've had a backlash, and you've had, I gather you've had death threats after this council meeting, and you've now actually had to move, and you're in an undisclosed location.
That's right, Mark. Yeah. After I went up to the council chambers to ask a question, I exposed about the council leader, Arush Shah, was hanging about with a convicted heroin dealer. And because of that, the backlash has been that I've had threats of kidnap and rape. So I had to speak to my family, and I had to flee the town. I then received a message again. I hope you're enjoying where you are. I was in Somerset at the time. And unfortunately, because I got that message from that person that instigated all of that, I've had to relocate again. So even half of my family now don't even know where I am.
That's a terrible thing. You're basically living in hiding because you wanted the truth of what happened to your daughter to be known. And you wanted Oldham Council to do something about it. This is a very corrupt town, Oldham, and there's too many of them. As you know, we've talked about Telford and we've talked about Rotherham, but this is going on and they always say, well, the report comes out, well, lessons have been learned. This is all a long, long time ago now, and we've changed everything. They haven't changed at all. We're going to have to go to Oldham and do some reporting on what's going on there. But thank you very much, Debbie, and you take care because, as Debbie has said, she's now basically moving. She's like somebody who's been targeted by ISIS and is having to be moved to safe houses every 48 hours. That this should be happening to you in the United Kingdom of 2022. It shames Oldham, it shames Greater Manchester, and it is a national disgrace. Let me know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. The permanent emergency continues around the free-ish world. Leilani Dowding will get into that. Plus, sudden death from unknown causes. There's a lot of it about. You don't want to pick up a case of unknown cause because it could prove fateful. Jamie Jenkins will run the numbers for us. But can you talk about it in Britain's groupthink media? Kathy Gingell is here. She's banned by Twitter. But that's why we like her. Stick around. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's hear what the people have to say about the rape gangs operating with impunity in towns from Telford to Oldham down to Aylesbury and Banbury, all over the map. Magic X says, you guys are going to have to realize that politeness, process and civility can all be vices situationally. You know, the rapists laugh at what a foolish culture they're allowed to exploit and abuse. The interesting thing about these rape gangs, you'd think if you're a member of a paedophile gang, it would be something you'd have to do sotto voce, hanging around in the shadows. No, in all these towns, these are networks. They're using some of the most prominent businesses in these towns as part of their organizational structure. It's going on out in the open. And you're quite right that the rapists laugh. They laugh at us when we use these pathetic euphemisms like grooming gangs. We're actually accepting their framing of the situation. Oh, I'm a worldly, sophisticated rapist, and this is a unworldly 9-year-old girl, and I'm just grooming her into the light. Why would you use their framing of it? They rape little girls. They dangle little girls off balconies. They douse little girls in petrol and then dance around them, jeering at them, holding lighted matches. And Asian men, because it's not Azerbaijanis, it's not Filipinos, or any of the people in between, except one particular segment of the population. So when you say grooming gangs, Asian men, and start using all these clever acronyms like CSE, you're actually euphemizing and anesthetizing a great evil in the heart of England. A Twitter user says, not covering up for these gangs for fear of being labeled racist might be a better deterrent. Yeah, that's I know all the little girls are being raped, but I don't want to be if they're, it's a bit racially sensitive, and I don't want to be tied up in sensitivity training for 6 months if I have to start going around and knocking on the doors of members of the community. Emden White says they need longer jail time and, where applicable, immediate deportation after they have served their time. Another Twitter user says, I suggest deportation the day they are convicted and put them on Interpol's list so they can never return. Why should we pay to feed and house them? Because we pay to feed and house basically anyone who washes up on the shore on Folkestone and Dover. We're paying to feed and house a good chunk of the world's population. Keith Mann says prison sentences for police, councillors, social workers, mayors, and anybody else who was supposed to be protecting the tens of thousands who were raped, but instead knowingly ignored them and let the rapes continue. The rapes do continue in those towns. It's a terrible situation. Certainly shames the British media, who are far too quiescent on this subject. And it would be nice when Liz Truss is here next week. Next Wednesday, she's going to be here with our pal Alistair Stewart. It would certainly be nice if Liz and Rishi Sunak were asked about this question. Angela Rayner. Her constituency includes parts of Oldham. But Angela Rayner isn't troubled by this matter at all, is she? We're going to stay on that one because it's important. It's vile what's happening. Whether it's Dutch farmers or Canadian truckers or those Sri Lankan revellers cavorting in the pool at Queen's House in Colombo, having sent their not-so-strong strongman scurrying to his plane in a one-way flight to exile in the Maldives, there are signs hither and yon that people are wearying of a transnationalist ruling class that can't get anything right. The brain-dead media warn about the rise of populism, very scary word. But the more immediate problem appears to be the unpopulists. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, Cruella von der Leyen and the European Union, Dr. Tedros and the World Health Organization, Farmer Bill Gates and his 800,000-acre locust farm. These people are making all sorts of plans for you, and there's not a polling station anywhere on earth where you can go and vote them out. With me now is Leilani Dowding. Leilani, before we get to the meat and the substance, you just bought an airline ticket.
Yes.
And you realised that all this stuff is now on your airplane ticket too.
Yeah, so I bought my ticket to go to Mexico, and I got an email through, and it told me how much carbon dioxide it was being used for me to fly over there. Actually, on my train ticket down, it told me I was using 69% less CO2 than going by car. So there's obviously an agenda going on here because, they're not going to put money in to find out all this information for no reason at all. So eventually, I think there's some conditioning going on.
Yeah.
They want you to see this, and they're probably going to use it for something later on. You know, last night you and Eva talked about how one of the Dutch ministers accidentally kind of slipped out about how they're going to do these, you know, carbon credits. But the odd thing to me is it's not pollution, it's not plastic, it's not cancer-causing chemicals seeping into the oceans or the atmosphere. It's carbon dioxide. Plants take up carbon dioxide. It's part of the carbon cycle. And when I was at school, photosynthesis was on the agenda. It wasn't gender studies and everything else. It was photosynthesis. The plants, the trees absorb the carbon dioxide. So, you know, I'm going to wear a badge saying I fed 2,000 oak trees or something for a week.
Well, you're right to say that they wouldn't be doing this if they weren't going to take it to the next stage.
Right.
And the next stage is obviously your flight to Mexico is using this much CO2. So unfortunately, all you're eligible for is a wet weekend in Wales. And that's going to be the next the next step of it. They wouldn't devise this means of measuring everything you do if they weren't going to use the information.
Exactly, or they'll tax you in some way, or something will happen where it's going to be another transfer of wealth. There's a lot of people that invested in this, like, you know, these green energy things, but it's not actually green. This whole carbon net zero thing is simply about carbon dioxide. As I said, no other pollutants, not plastics, carbon dioxide and you know, it's not even, the science isn't 100% there as to whether that's actually causing any climate change, which is the craziest thing to me. There was a 2016 NASA study that said that actually a slight increase in carbon dioxide has helped re-green a lot of Africa. You know, when people are growing plants and vegetables on an industrial scale, they blow in carbon dioxide to help the plants grow.
Right.
So,
no, you're right. Places that were desertified have become re-greened. So these pampered Western climate ninnies would rather we go back to the days of far more starving Africans. It's a very weird way of looking at it. But you tweeted earlier today something it was a very interesting story. Spain is announcing that there's going to be cutbacks on heating and air conditioning. It's summer right now in Spain, and Spain is a very agreeable summer climate. And you're not going to be able to use air conditioning below 27 Celsius. I had no idea what 27 centigrade was, so I looked it up, and it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can't use air conditioning unless it gets to 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
And you can see that this is going to keep happening all over the place with our energy. You know, they're going to start making cuts, almost like lockdowns. You can only travel a certain amount of, you know, to certain distances or certain places. And as you said, it's these people that have, these billionaires and these technocrats that have all this influence within our government, within scientists, within the universities, not just with, you know, COVID and that narrative, but also with climate change. So again, it's not really up for discussion. We can't, you know, you can't have open discourse. You know, there was the HSBC executive got suspended for not agreeing with the narrative, you know, so...
And how did that actually come about? Because we all thought, well, Bill Gates, he did such a fabulous job on Windows 98. It's just great that he's the senior public health official for the planet now. You know, in the old days, a century ago, Henry Ford, people were sophisticated enough to recognize that Henry Ford, he's great, he built the Model T Ford, he knows a lot about automobiles, God bless him, mass production of motor vehicles, but he hates Jews and he's completely crazy on that stuff, so we won't pay a word to anything he says about anything other than his ability to make excellent motor cars. We seemed able to distinguish them. The idea now that computer manufacturers and movie stars should be telling us our diet and our carbon allowance is insane.
It's gone completely mad, and you know, like I said, there is an absolute obsession with it at the moment. But I do think that a lot of people can see what's going on. There's so many people against, you know, the net zero and these green levies and all this tax. It's just another wealth transfer. And I think after the last 2 years, there are a lot of people that are going to stand up and fight against it. Otherwise, you know, what's the point?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we need the certain qualities of the Canadian truckers and the Dutch I would like it if Canadian truckers took up with nice Dutch farmers and had Sri Lankan pool splashers, and they all merged into one super race, taking our liberty back for us.
I do know there's a lot of English farmers. I'm friends with a few farmers that are really sick and tired of being told that cow farts are the problem with
oh no, the bovine,
yeah.
Bovine flatulence is a terrible. That's just the terrible. The bovine flatulence. They actually measure it.
Yeah.
In Germany, the finest scientists in the land invented it's humiliating for the cow. The cow has to wear this thing like a giant set of lederhosen measuring his flatulence, and people laugh at it because it's a cow. They're going to be doing it to you're going to be wearing that lederhosen, and they're measuring your flatulence next. That's what it's going to be. Thank you very much, Leilani. It's always great to see you, and have a good time in Mexico. Just blow through your carbon, run up a huge overdraft in carbon, and see what the banks are going to do about it. Back in the days when we had a functioning press, there used to be a convenient rule in Fleet Street that 3 make a trend. These days, 300 don't make a trend, 3,000. Wherever you live in these islands, you may have noticed a certain kind of story in your local paper. More or less random selection of headlines here. From the Dudley News, that's the West Midlands, tributes to Bilston trainee firefighter who died suddenly. From the Leader in Wrexham, this next one, a tribute has been paid to a one-of-a-kind dad from North Wales who died suddenly, 36 years old. From the Bolton News, that's Lancashire, son pays tribute to his dad who died suddenly. From the Blackpool Gazette, that is also Lancashire, tribute to bubbly, outgoing, lively St Anne's mum who died suddenly, aged just 50. From the Bury Times, that's also Lancashire until they moved it into Great Manchester. I don't really recognise that boundary change. Tributes to St Gabriel's Roman Catholic pupil who died suddenly. That's just a heartbreaking story. Poor mum went out looking for her 15-year-old son, who'd gone off to play footy, and she found him dead. So that's 3 just from Lancashire who, quote, died suddenly. As we reported last week, in the Canadian province of Alberta, the leading cause of death is now cause unknown. Whatever it was that killed you, they can't say. But you're more likely to die of cause unknown than of cancer or a stroke or anything else. And there is as yet no vaccine for cause unknown, although I've no doubt that even as we speak, Pfizer is working on one, a crackerjack vaccine for cause unknown. In the mother country, we're not as plain spoken as those blunt colonials in Alberta. So in England, in June 2022, the death category with the largest increase over the 5-year average was something called, quote, symptoms, signs, and ill-defined conditions. What's that all about? Well, it's from the Manual of the International Classification of Diseases, Injuries and Deaths, and it means non-specific causes of death. In other words, as the Albertans say, cause unknown. What's going on here? Let's welcome back statistician Jamie Jenkins, former head honcho of health numbers at the Office for National Statistics. Jamie, excess mortality, I think the last report from the Office of National Statistics was for the week of July the 22nd, and it was running at 18%. Excess mortality. That's rather a lot. Are you surprised it's not getting more play?
No, Mark. Good evening. I think it's probably worth starting actually where we are and what we've seen over the last 2 years. And remember now, we've seen over 140,000 excess deaths since the start of 2020, and people can't die twice. So you would expect the longer you go into, say, the pandemic and beyond the pandemic, that you start seeing deaths start becoming below average, because people obviously who may have been dying now may have been tragically killed earlier on during the pandemic. So what we've seen in 2022 so far is that up until around week 15, deaths were actually below average. And it's since then we've started seeing deaths go above average. And the total, if you take the whole year altogether, we're running about 3.8% above average for 2015 to 2019 when you compare that and the 2022 figures that we've got now. Now, the latest week's figures are quite high. They're the highest we've seen over the course of the year so far. Now, there will be a slight impact of the heat wave. You do normally see a little spike in deaths across the country when you see a heat wave. Nowhere near, though, Mark, the kind of the doomsayers who were saying we might see 10,000 deaths because of the heat wave. Nowhere near that. But that's why the latest week's numbers are a little bit high. But just go before that, they've been running about 11 to 15% over the past few weeks above average. Now, what I've done is, because you don't normally see that in the latest figures every week, is crunch the numbers in terms of different age groups. So if we look at the under 10s across the country, now the deaths for 2022 for under 10s, they've actually been running below average. Now, people who are aged 10 to 19, they're about 8% above average. The other age groups where we start to see kind of double digits above average is 30 to 39-year-olds, they're 11% above average. 55 to 59-year-olds are 13% above average. And then the biggest group is 75 to 79. Now, they're 15% above average. But you've got to remember, we've got the post-war, Second World War baby boomers now hitting 76, 77 years old. There's a lot of them. So we've got more in that age group. So it's not surprising we're seeing more deaths in the 75 to 79 age category. But there is something underlying going on in these other age groups as well, which I think does need a good investigation so we can be a bit reassured what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, what about, you mentioned the increase in deaths of teenagers, which is tragic. It offends against the natural order. If a mother has to do as that poor lady did and her son's late home and she's to go out and she finds him, quote, unresponsive in the woods. There have been actually quite a lot of deaths of young men 15 to 19. Why, we go on all the time about, oh, we're doing it for the children, this is for the children, it's about the future of all our children. When you have excess mortality of teenage boys, why is there such little interest in it?
Well, I'm not sure on this, Mark. Obviously, you're covering the story quite a lot. And remember, the way the deaths work, if there's something that's kind of unknown about a death or something that's sudden, when you've been talking about sudden death, you don't then just suddenly go and register the death. You would normally have a coroner's inquest to look at the circumstances around there. So there should be, when we start looking over time now, because remember, these are deaths that have been registered. The ONS will only publish these deaths when they've been notified of the death. So there'll be some deaths that may have actually occurred at the moment that are not in the system yet because they'll await a coroner's verdict. Now, there's a number of factors that could be behind all of this. What we do know is that there's a story out this week about A&E wait since April. So we've been seeing these excess deaths since the start of April. Now, we have seen COVID deaths go up in recent months, Mark, with the latest wave that's kind of dying down now. But that does not explain that we're seeing more non-COVID excess deaths. Some of it is to do with the aging population. We've got a few more people than we're comparing to an average. But, A&E waits have gone up dramatically since April. People have been staying home, protecting the NHS for 2 years. All these misdiagnoses that is going on. So there's a lot of factors at play.
Well, and just to underline the point you made at the beginning, if you have excess mortality because of COVID in the spring of 2020, that in theory, once that's worked its way through, as you say, by now we should actually be having lower mortality rates, because as you explained it to us, a fellow who might have lived out and keeled over in 2023 died of the COVID in the spring of 2020. So this 18% excess death rate, as you say, it's not explained by the COVID, and there seems to be a certain I would say, institutional lack of interest and certainly a media lack of interest. Thank you very much for running those numbers for us, Jamie. It's always good to see you. Stump the Steyn is looming, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and Cathy Gingell is banned permanently from Twitter. On this show, that's like winning gold at the Commonwealth Games. It always speaks well for a person to be booted off Twitter. We're delighted to have her right here on GB News, and she's coming next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
For half a century, ever since Watergate, the political wise guys have said it's not the crime that gets you, it's the cover-up. And there was a lot of truth to that. We're not hearing it so much these days, but it popped into my head this afternoon when I was thinking of this ITV clip we played the other day. This morning, Philip Schofield and the gang, and the deadly groupthink propaganda at its most shameless.
Well, what's really excellent is, and it's a statistic that I think should be shouted from the rooftops, is that after 12 days from the first vaccination of the AstraZeneca vaccine, you are 100% effective against hospitalisation and death. So, you know, those are the statistics we need to be hearing.
Why haven't we heard that before?
Why haven't we heard that before? Well, as we said on Monday, because it's not in the least bit true. And no one at Ofcom, because they're too busy investigating this show, so no one at Ofcom is ever going to investigate that perfectly respectable telly doctor for a super confident declaration of 100% protection that she was in no position to make about a brand new product with no long-term data. But let's give her the benefit of the doubt. She's an enthusiastic type. Maybe she just got a little carried away by all the ballyhoo around these so-called vaccines. It's a shame people died and are chronically injured, but she was acting in good faith. What would be the quickest way to undermine that defense? Well, you do what Facebook and Twitter and Full Fact and that cowardly creep Jim Waterson at The Guardian are doing. You would, in effect, go to war on the perfectly respectable citizens whose lives are ruined because of these ersatz vaccines. They have doctors' diagnoses, they have death certificates, they have coroner's verdicts, and some of them even have six-figure compensation from Her Majesty's government. But you're Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook and even Jim Waterson, media editor of The Guardian, and you have the power of the press. And so you can insult these victims, deny their pain, deny the hospitals and the courts and the government's recognition of their pain, label them as fake news, kick them off social media, pile daily insults onto the great injury done to them. And you do it on such an industrial scale that eventually even the most moderate, temperate fellow starts to wonder, why is this necessary? Why are they denying reality? Is this a conscious strategy And if so, what else are they covering up? Kathy Gingell, founder of The Conservative Woman, an excellent website you should check out daily, knows what's going on because she's a victim of it. She's just been permanently banned by the totalitarian commissars at Twitter for basically retweeting a very painful and honest tweet by one of the vaccine victims.
Yes, hi Mark. No, it's absolutely astonishing. I was banned for what might be called a sympathy, a compassionate tweet. I was particularly horrified by seeing this woman who was not told that it would trigger her autoimmune disease that she had already, and it brought out terrible symptoms of skin disorders, painful, appalling, and led her into other treatment that also didn't work. So it was a sort of veritable sort of toxic storm for her. And I said, poor woman, how can the people responsible for this sleep at night? And I have been suspended from Twitter about 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years for my fairly forthright reports on vaccine injuries and etc. But this is a total. I'm kicked off. I'm an outcast. I'm now on Getter. I mean, half of me doesn't mind because they're so despicable. Do I really want to be using this dreadful thing? But on the other hand, it is very bad because what they're doing is they're not just denying the vaccine victim. In fact, that woman's still on Twitter, I found. They're denying somebody who's in some sort of authority. I'm not in authority, but has a known view that people in Westminster do read the website. They're denying me communicating it or making a judgment about it. And of course, this isn't just Twitter. It's happening across the board from the start of the vaccine, or from the start of lockdown.
Why are they so keen to protect the fairy tale? Because the fairy tale, the Philip Schofield fairy tale, is ridiculous.
Well, the fairy tale's been very effectively protected from the beginning. If you went into the vaccine trials, as we did, back at the end of December, what was it, 2019, 20. I mean, these were ridiculous. I mean, they were so short. The AstraZeneca trials were suspended twice, one for Guillain-Barré syndrome or transverse myelitis. But everybody decided really not to look at it. You can find the odd report. The major newspapers didn't cover it. There was a sort of an agreement of silence that vaccines were the way out. Therefore, nobody must question it. If you did question it, you were unpatriotic. There was a shaming process of anyone who questioned it from way back. On The Conservative Woman, we were some of the first, if not the first, to do regular reports on the medical health regulatory authority that is meant to monitor and publish the vaccine reports. Nobody else was doing it. It astonishes me. 2,200 people have died, and basically the MHRA, which lists these, says it's probably a temporal association. I mean, they use this language.
Yeah, I don't understand why they... this is the thing. I mean, the numbers are startling. We were just talking about an 18%, the most recent figure, 18% increase in excess mortality in England. That's a lot of corpses. It's basically... it was basically running at an extra 1,000 corpses a week. It's gone up to like 1,500 now. How high is it going to go before anybody says, any journalist says, oh, gee, I might win some kind of prize if I were to look into
I mean, it's astonishing. I cannot believe if Harold Evans hadn't been alive with the Sunday Times, he could not have looked into this. Within the first few months, the number of vaccine injuries being reported, often by reluctant doctors, and not reported at all because many doctors didn't even know about the yellow card system, were as many reports as had been for all vaccines in the previous 10 years. So it's astonishing. And on this one with the skin disorder, I mean, I'm putting in my complaint to Twitter, and saying, no, you're not right. I'm going to fight it, of course. There are 102,000 skin disorders actually published by the government, effectively, by a government quango made to do this job just in the last 2 weeks. So how can they ban me from Twitter for sympathising sympathising with a vaccine-triggered skin disorder.
And as you say, well, there's like over 100,000 just in the last couple of weeks up there on the government, but you can't say it in public. This is madness, Kathy. It's absolute crazy madness, and we're gonna stay on this because as long as people aren't interested.
Very quickly, journalists, please, journalists, not just me, focus attention on the MHRA.
Yeah.
They are really culpable. I mean, social media is culpable, Twitter, the mainstream media is culpable. The MHRA is deeply culpable.
No, that's the Medical Health Regulatory Agency. That'll do it for us, but never fear. 2 words. Dan Wootton. He's going to wallop your Wednesday. What you got, Dan?
Mark Steyn, good evening. I have to say, I miss Kathy Gingell on Twitter. Bring her back. The platform isn't the same without her. Mark, do you know what? Well, I'm just going to say to you very quickly tonight, you are the BBC slayer. You don't like to blow your own trumpet, but this week, here you are, beating every single news channel on British TV, including the BBC, with all of the ingrained advantages they have. That's all I want to say tonight. How bloody incredible.
Well, you were right, actually, that their Commonwealth Games coverage is just so tortured. This thing like, oh, it's this racist imperialist thing. Oh, but isn't the shot put interesting? They can't ride that. That's a pantomime horse with 2 rear ends, and they can't ride it. Dan Wootton coming up after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Good news, if you're not a fan of the humidity, it is turning fresher for all of us tonight and tomorrow. Remaining dry though across the south, not much rain where we really need it. There will be showers further north from low pressure. There is this weather front drifting south that is introducing the cooler and fresher air, but it's not introducing much rain. And the warmth and humidity still there at the moment across East Anglia and the southeast, but it will turn cooler as the night goes on. But as I said, not much in the way of rainfall, just the odd shower here and there. Much more in the way of rainfall further north, some pretty heavy rain this evening for Northern Ireland, and we'll see some heavy bursts of rain across